So, greetings, everyone. My name is Peter Young. I'm a member of the Committee 100, and I happen to be chair of the Asian American Career Ceilings Initiative of Committee 100 that started about 3.5 years ago. This is our 41st event since then. Plus, we also had a Career Ceilings event at our annual conference in Gala in April. So it's the 42nd. And I just want to at the very beginning here, just talk about the program briefly and what some of the upcoming events are before we go into today's webcast, which, by the way, I am very excited about. I think this is actually a very exciting topic. We have a wonderful speaker, and I give credit to Kevin Fang, who came up with this idea of doing this particular topic and coming up with our speaker. So hats off to Kevin Fang. So how did this all start? I mean, it all started essentially because, Committee 100, we have two missions. One is the domestic mission, which is how do you protect and help Chinese Americans, and we actually are very more broadly Asian Americans, but also how do you do and promote better relations between the U.S. and China. So those are the two. This obviously fits under the domestic mission. And what we've done is we've tried to do things that sort of fit into a number of categories. One is highlighting researchers, their work, and what does it say about how bad the problem is, but also characterizing the problem and what is causing the problem. We have speakers talking about their experiences in different industries and different age groups. We actually had one on millennials where it was 4 millennials talking about the problem from their point of view and their age group. We've had summits where we brought together people who are running DEI and other related groups, ERG groups in different companies, get together to share stories, experiences, and then try to come up with new ideas. And we also have idea generation, where we try to get people together to come up with new ideas that could be pursued. And last, unrelated to these events, we have resources that we're trying to make available. So there's a Discord social media site where there's a directory of all the nonprofits that deal with this issue, as well as ability to chat with each other and an events calendar. So that's really what we're doing. And this particular type of event is a new one. We decided that it would be great if we had some master classes where we had people who could really teach individuals or organizations some things that were very helpful to know. So this is our second one, masterclass for individuals. The first one in December was how do you identify stereotypes and biases and how do you overcome them? And this is second one, which is developing a personal brand. Going forward, we have a couple things. One is we're going to have a masterclass on how do you network, and then we're going to have a experiences event on what the problem is in the real estate industry and so forth. So, and you'll get invitations to those. The last thing I want to say is at the end, we're trying to leave 5 or 10 minutes for questions. And the way you ask a question is you just type it in the Q&A chat box. And both Jerry and I are going to be able to see those questions. And I'll try to select as many as we can to get through before the end of the session. We like to start on time and end on time. So we will end promptly at the end of the hour. So let me start out. I mean, Jerry and I have agreed to, 7 or 8 questions, but I think we agreed that I'd start out with just an intro that says, when Asian Americans think about career ceilings and paths to success, we tend to think about successful training or academic achievements or how hard you work or networking or finding mentors or figuring out when there's a bias or stereotype or choosing the right professions, which ones are harder or easier from of career ceilings. But, it's interesting. Over all of these sessions we've had, very few people, if any, have actually said that creating a personal brand is an important thing. So when we first thought about this, and Kevin raised this during our volunteers committee meeting, everybody said, you know, something, it is actually an important topic and it actually quite relevant to this issue. So this event is going to focus on helping the audience, i.e. all of you, understand, one, what personal branding is, two, how is it different depending on what profession or objective you are in or seeking, because the approach can be very, very different, and Jerry will comment on that. And then what the tools are to achieve effective personal brands. And our hope is that you walk away saying, all right, you decide whether personal branding is something that's important for your success, but you have a way of knowing what tools are available and which ones would apply to your situation. So I want to start out, and Jerry, we're not going to read your bio because everyone in this on this who is attending, I assume, know how to read. But I'd like you to tell the audience, you know, briefly what you do, a little bit about your personal history, but how you became involved with this whole issue of personal branding. And in fact, quite frankly, you not only talk about personal branding, but you yourself obviously have created a personal brand in your profession. So, Jerry, can you sort of share some of those thoughts with us?
Yeah, thank you, Peter, and thank you, everybody. Just a quick housekeeping thing. I think people are, if you want to ask us a question, there's a Q&A function that you can uh, ask us questions with. I know the chat is disabled. So I now have the job title that I didn't think I could have as an immigrant Asian kid from Korea, which is to speak for a living and then to help other people speak for a living. And so I am a professional keynote speaker on the topics of personal branding, on storytelling, and my passion area, which is art leadership, so Asian American leadership. Previously to this, I was a sales and marketing person after undergrad, went to business school, did the consulting bit, and for the last 5.5 years, I've been on my own. Um, and so, for me, personal branding is, sort of the modern way to think about what your reputation is, right? What is your professional reputation? How do people know you? What are they willing to pay you for, whether that is giving you a job or hiring you for something? And, for us, though, I think, I know we're going to get deeper into it. A lot of it is up here. A lot of it is, psychological and mental, sort of the breaks that we have to go through, unlearn. For me, and I'm sure maybe some of you can relate. Um, I grew up with my mom telling me, stop bragging so much, stop talking about yourself, right? And it is sort of in this collective culture that we generally have been raised. And so there's no one right way to build a personal brand. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. But step one is believing that you have a gift to this world, to your employer, to clients, to other people, and really believe that what you've experienced and the lessons that you've learned are of value, and really putting that into the universe. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited to spend some time with y'all. Stick around to the end. I have a special gift for you all to hopefully help write better bios and then to have a stronger presence on LinkedIn. But shout out to Peter, the friends at C100, for providing this opportunity. We got more than 70 of you here on a Thursday night, and so
And they're still coming in. So, you know, the late comers get a special prize, right,
that's
Jerry?
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, by the way, just so you know, I misspoke. You should type your question into the Q&A chat box. Zoom has two chat boxes, a regular chat box and Q&A. And I know the Q&A chat box is working because three of you have typed messages in that I can see. So again, my fault. It's not the chat box, it's the Q&A chat box. And one of the three comments was, the regular chat box is not working. So I know that. So, you know, it's interesting. Let's start out with something pretty basic, and that is, what is personal branding? You know, I know maybe it's bad to try to force a definition, but is there a good definition that is would be helpful to the audience?
Yeah, I mean it's a different way for reputation, right? But it is reputation from a perspective of an exchange of value, in my opinion. And so the way that I sort of think about the five different levels or evolution of what most people think about reputation and personal brand is, one, we were always taught to value what we know, right? So we go to school, we learn a lot, we're good at what we do. We have the unfortunate stereotype of being good workers, not great leaders, and so it's about what we know, right? And Study hard is something that has been ingrained into our brains for a very long time, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. And then somehow, when we learn about the ways that American education system, American networks, and the business community works, we were then taught to go to level two, which is it's not what you know, it's who you know. Right. So then we start getting to know, go to networking events and all these things. And it's like, hey, I know a bunch of people that's going to be much better than just what I know. We want to couple those things together. Then the next level of that isn't necessarily who you know, but you have to understand to be known, you have to have a lot of people who know you. Right. And so who knows you? Because you can know a lot of people, but people have to know you to then hire you for something, to be called upon to something, to be an expert in whatever thing that you are really good at. So what you know, who knows you. The fourth level is a subset of that is what do they know you for?
Mhm.
Right? What is your reputation? Are you known to be a finance wizard? Are you known to be a legal wizard in a particular industry? And then to put it all together is based on what you know, who knows you, and what they know you for. The fifth level is when the value exchange happens. What is that person or what are the people who know you willing to pay you for? Right? So it's getting to that point of having a reputation so strong and having an identity or professional expertise so strong that people think about you when they think about a personal brand, right? And so, um, an example that I can give is if I give you a person's name and I'm going to give you three of these names, you're going to think of a word or a theory or an idea that they're really, really known for, right? So we'll start with Brene Brown. Most of you probably thought vulnerability,
Mhm.
right? And if I say Angela Duckworth, uh, it's going to be grit. And if I say Simon Sinek, you're probably thinking why, right? Because his whole brand is around starting with why. And so those people, aside from the fact that now they have New York Times bestselling authors or title to their name, they got a whole staff of people. They spent years developing this craft and developing this reputation of being known for one thing. And so, whatever that means to you, what are your industry peers, your colleagues, your clients, your friends and family? What do they know you for? And so it is sort of building that personal brand, that reputation, all the way to the point. And then, again, I think we're going to go into it deeper, but you get to define what that is, and you also get to exercise how people know you for, right? And so, what are your values? What are your, what things matter to you? How do you work, and all that good stuff. That's a good starting point of understanding what the personal branding is.
Yeah, that's a good definition. I would add one slight nuance, which actually is, I think, part of your point three or four, which is how you amplify the message, right?
Hmm.
Because people can have an impression, but a big thing is how many people, to what extent you can amplify your brand so that more people know. And we'll get into that because we're going to talk about social media, other things later, but that's an element too. It's not only what are what do people think of you and what they know you for, it's how many people get to know, right?
Yeah.
As well. So now there's an interesting thing. Yeah, I Googled on personal brand. It's amazing how many articles have been written about personal branding. And recently, and not only that, in prominent magazines, I mean, the Forbes, Fortune, all Wall Street Journal. So it's actually a topic that people care about. But it was interesting. There was one article, I think it was a Forbes article, that I said that it was very interesting. It said, before you focus on how to develop an effective personal brand, you have to know who you are, what you want to achieve, and what type of personal branding is appropriate for your goal and who you are. And so it says, before you try to figure out branding, you want to understand yourself and what you're trying to do. Do you agree with this statement, Jerry? And could you elaborate maybe on how you view that concept?
Yeah, I think it's important to know where you're going, right? And so, personal branding should have at least some sort of a broad goal or a finish line. To put it another way, you're going to spend time, energy, even money and resources to develop a personal brand, to spend time creating content if that's something that is important to you, to, go out into the world and build your network. And then the question is, so what? What are you going to do with the followers that you gain? What are you going to do with the reputation that you build? Right. And so that last piece, the so what for you, It could be getting a promotion. It could be landing a TEDx talk. It could be landing more clients for your consulting business. It could be a whole lot of things. But having super clear clarity on what you want out of building this is really important because that also should inform where you show up, right? And so if you are a corporate person, if you work in the traditional 9 to 5 space, LinkedIn is probably where you should be,
Yeah.
right? If you are potential ban in 3 days aside, if you are in the content space and you are in the, the commerce or the, in a more of a modern space, then TikTok might be the place for you, right? If you want to sell long form stories, YouTube might be your space. And then for everybody in between, it's in-person networking, it's email lists, and all these things. And so having that so what be super clear also informs um, those things. I see the questions that are coming in, and so if it's relevant,
No, no, no,
I
no.
I
We're going to
will
wait till the
infuse
end.
it.
We're going to wait
Okay.
till the end. Now yeah,
Okay.
from experience. Uh, yeah, yeah, by the way, members of I run an investment bank, and members of my staff have said, you know something, we're not going to promote our firm on TikTok or Facebook. He said LinkedIn is space. So it's a little what you're saying, which is you got to use the right tool, right? And the right tool is not just in terms of how effective it is, but how appropriate it is for who you are and what you're trying to communicate, right? I said, really, we're not a TikTok? He said, no, 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 we're not a TikTok type entity. And by the way, your clients don't use TikTok, or at least they won't admit they do. So that makes it an easy transition to the next question, which is how should the audience think about the tools that are available, right?
Yeah.
For personal branding, because it's like anything, whether you're a carpenter or you're like each one you have different tools. So what are the tools that you think of for personal branding that one might choose from and decide which
Sure.
to use?
I mean, there's an infinite number of tools, so maybe we can sort of bifurcate this answer into sort of platforms
Mhm.
and then actual tools that can help you
Right.
amplify.
That's
And
fine.
so, in terms of, and I'm going to speak from a digital perspective, right? Because I think that's where we all show up. And so, joining organizations or showing up to events like this that are hosted by C100 and even within our own Asian American community, there are many other wonderful professional development oriented organizations where you can go and to sort of build networks. But I'm going to talk broadly about where I live online for professionals. And back then, it was known as a place to have a digital resume, but it is far beyond that, which is LinkedIn. There are other platforms that are, still good for a variety of different professions. Uh, Instagram, even TikTok, right? Like there are brands, there are serious businesses. Maybe investment banking isn't one, and certainly a government office isn't going to be, but there are many different places to build that for you. Basically, it's wherever your people are so that you can be seen as an expert, so that you can let people know what you are really good at, right? And so it's about, another sort of buzzy word that's being thrown around is thought leadership, but it's just a fancy way of saying like, what value can you add to the person who maybe is just a couple of steps behind you in the path that you've chosen? And so LinkedIn is my favorite place to be. It's both where, so for a lot of different reasons. One, most professionals are on LinkedIn one way, shape, or form. There's a couple hundred people, million people that are on LinkedIn. I would assume that most of yourselves and peers are on there. Um, Most of us, and I say Asian American professionals, are really terrible at utilizing, leveraging LinkedIn and all its tools for its maximum efficiency. I used to be one of those people, and now I help people get out of that. And like I started with, a lot of it is here, right? And so, how many of you didn't publicly celebrate a promotion? Right? How many of you did not publicly celebrate an award that you got,
Yeah.
right? Something that could help the next person consider you for promotion, for a article to be written. And so if you remember anything about this hour that we're going to spend together, it's this notion that whatever has happened to you is an historical fact. Like it happened. You're not making it up. There's a difference between saying, you know, uh, Jerry is the best speaker on personal branding, which is an opinion and maybe or may not be true, but Jerry has spoken at the White House is a factual thing that happened. And so when I coach people, it's like getting them to the point of feeling more comfortable about saying something out loud, right? And LinkedIn is a place where, yes, there's a lot of memes and sort of, poo-pooing on LinkedIn because it's a place where people quote unquote brag and flex, which is fine, but like start somewhere where you can get both the historical achievements that you should be celebrating yourself for out. Two, every single one of you, you've done some amazing things at work. You've learned some stuff, you figured some things out, and celebrate that, right? And again, there is this nuance that you own LinkedIn as your personal space, not as a mouthpiece of your company. But if you've done some wonderful things at work, if you've won a deal, if you worked on something, if you closed something, start getting more comfortable talking about those things. Now, and you can use some of those elements on Instagram and whatnot. And so, me as a public speaker, to use myself as an example, I have B2B clients and I have B2C clients. On the B2B end of things, they are schools, companies, conferences, and speaking bureaus that hire me to go speak at their event, whether that is virtual or in person. 99% of those people live on LinkedIn. It's a great place to find networking. It's a great place to tell them about the work that I am doing, to build my own profile of hey, if Jerry is speaking at Google, maybe we should invite him as well. Wow, he took the stage at a big Asian American Professional Development Conference during the summer, and maybe we want to invite him as well. That's more LinkedIn. You can still market B2C stuff on LinkedIn as well, which I do as well for my speaking coaching business and some of the other stuff that I do. But more of that stuff is also on Instagram. I will say that even not most, a lot of my B2B clients and I are friends on Instagram. And I think you all have seen sort of how people use Instagram to tell behind the scenes stories that may not be as LinkedIn appropriate. But LinkedIn is my favorite place, and you all should pay more attention to that.
Yeah.
And then on the tools front, and the big elephant in the room is AI. And so what I will say about AI is a wonderful complement to your ideating, your coming up with sort of brainstorming stuff. I still don't think you should copy and paste what ChatGPT tells you or what Claude tells you to write. At the end of the day, whatever you post on the internet with your name attached to it becomes an extension of your reputation.
And you can't
And
get rid of it.
you can't get rid of it. And the only thing that I will say is there's only one of you. You're special enough, you're awesome enough, and to maintain that level of authenticity, which is intricately tied to your reputation and your personal brand, is something that is not worth risking. I will tell you, and maybe some of you have spidey senses like I do. When you see somebody whose post is obviously either AI written or ghost written, it is really obvious. There are now bots that you can sign up for or services that you can sign up for that will auto comment on people's posts under your profile that is basically a regurgitation, and it's using AI and it's all automated. And there are people who sell services to say, I will do this for you to boost your profile on LinkedIn and gain you XYZ followers. I'm not a big fan of that stuff. Human connection is at the core of what LinkedIn is. Human connection is what your personal branding is about. And so, it's like back in the day, people bought followers on Instagram and, they all got it taken away. Like, just as long, do the things that will let you sleep at night, and something that you can own up to your mom with, right? Like, I did this the right way is what I would say.
Depending who your mom is like, right?
Sure.
We all
Yeah.
have different moms. By the way, I'll have a short little story, humorous story about AI, and that is when AI first came out, when ChatGPT first came out, I was doing a panel about a month later. It was about AI, right? And I had two panelists, and I told them last minute, I said, there's going to be a third panelist, but I'm not going to tell you who it is. And we had 6 questions, like, you and I, Jerry, we have like 5 or 6 questions. So what they didn't know is I fed those questions through ChatGPT, and I used text to speech so that I called on the first two, and then the third, I said, "Oh, by the way, our surprise third panelist is ChatGPT," and ChatGPT gave the answer. So it was hilarious. The audience just they loved it. And at the very end, I asked the two human panelists. I said, "How did ChatGPT?" They said, "Pretty good, but a little wordy." That was there. But there's one comment, Jerry, that I want to ask you, which is it's like anything marketing, a personal brand is like a form of marketing, right? Um, do you think, do you sort of have, there's some friends of mine who just say you want to reverse engineer. You want to say, okay, who am I trying to get to? And what are the channels of communication that they find acceptable that I can, and I'll give you an example. For example, as an investment bank, some of the things we do to quote the brand for the firm is we contribute articles to all the leading magazines in the industries we serve and so forth. And so it's like it creates a lot of credibility because obviously if you write a good article, but also if you're chosen by the periodical, pharmaceutical executive, whatever, then it adds credibility. So this reverse engineering concept, could you elaborate? Do you agree with that? But also, could you elaborate a little bit on how you do that, if it's a legitimate way to, strengthen your personal brand?
Yeah, 100%. I think in the age of TikTok and YouTube subscriber counts, we're sort of in this zombie land of equating or conflating follower count with expertise. And that's not true, right? At the end of the day, regardless of whether you are corporately employed or wanting to start a business or whatever it is, frankly, the only metric is how many deals are you getting, how much money are you making, right? Like, and I'm not trying to make myself sound like a total capitalist, but at the end of the day, for
Yeah,
your professional pursuit, those are the metrics that matter.
yeah,
And so, um, there are people with 500 LinkedIn followers that are leveraging the platform for far greater good than people with 500,000 followers.
right.
And I would argue that at 500,000 followers, you don't have a target demographic. You're just
Yeah,
publicly well known.
yeah,
And so there is merit in understanding whatever you do, right? And so if you are, for example, um, a professor, right? And you're trying to get another tenure professor job somewhere, um, trying to build a YouTube page may not get you to that role. However, right, figuring out the academic journals, going to the right conferences, right, networking with the right peers in your industry might garner better results, right? And so
those of you who are professors online, write that down. It's very important. Good
I but
advice.
but I have plenty of professor friends who've also built secondary income streams and consulting work, and I don't know if y'all have seen Professor Potato on TikTok. Ryan Ball is a business school professor of mine who found fame by broadcasting one of his lectures with the potato skin back in the day from TikTok and got really
Mhm,
famous on it.
mhm.
And like that's paid dividends for him. And so we're also living in a world, friends, where the definition of what is professional and what is formal is constantly evolving, right? And so um, there's probably just a few industries still, like top secret government stuff or things in that realm that are so serious and so formal and traditional where they don't allow for any of that. But I mean, you know, I think it's time to think sort of outside the box of who you want to be. But to get to your point, Peter, I think your question is that so what is critically important, and that the subset of so what is who are you trying to, so to
Who you're
get to
trying
your
to
so
reach,
what,
right?
yeah,
Exactly.
whose heart are you trying to win, right? And so um and I'll again use my industry as an example. I have friends who are not very well known names outside of the speaking circuit, but make great money being really busy and being top of mind for a lot of these engagements. And I would bet that we have about 100 people in this chat that you've seen some of these friends at your company's conferences and kickoffs and things like that. But they know who they want to build a relationship with, right? And these are the event planners, the speaking bureau agents, and the executives that bring them in. And so, um, I'll, so the thing that I will say this, and then again, you can write this down. It's not, the point of it isn't to be well known. The point of all of this is to be known well, right? You want to be known well by the right people who can move
By
the
the
needle
people
for you.
you want to know who do that.
Correct.
Exactly, right.
Being well known does not, to be known well, you are well known to your people, but it doesn't go the other way. You can be well known, but for nothing. And so you have to be really, mindful of that.
Yeah. I have a question. Let me shift a little bit, and that is, one thing that's very clear in the 41 or whatever of these events is that um, the problem and the tools available if you're Asian American can be very different if you're Asian American versus if you're, Caucasian or you're Latino or whatever it is. And I suspect that's also the case here, that uh, it may be, and you're going to tell me whether this is true, that the extent to which personal branding is different if you're Asian American, as to what works and doesn't work might be different. It's certainly true that Asian Americans come at this differently. I mean,
Yeah.
you said before, if you're Asian American, at least up to a certain generation, your parents said, keep your head down, don't whatever, which of course one would think is the
Yeah.
antithesis of trying to get publicity. So what do you think? What do you see the differences are on this issue of personal branding for Asian Americans, both in terms of the nature of the challenge, but also the tools that you should be using in order to be successful?
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this for days. I think one, I think it's good to acknowledge here that, for political and for voice reasons, we've all decided to align to one checkbox on a census form.
Mhm.
And I think it's good to, be mindful about how complex and how diverse we are, even within our own ethnic groups, depending on when your family came, how you came, and what your experience was here, including where you moved to, under what circumstance. And so I want to just shout that out because when I get to speak on Asian American issues, there are a lot of people who will put their hand up and say, yo, but that's not my experience. I said, I know. I think the challenge is trying to distill everybody's diverse experiences into one thing. However, I think there are some generalities and things that we can talk about. Um, you know, uh, Promoting oneself isn't something that our parents' generation, broadly speaking, had the
Right.
luxury of doing. Right? They were trying to survive. They didn't know the system. They didn't go to the schools that you and I went to. They certainly didn't work at the places that you and I get to. And so the generational education of how to build a reputation, the networks that we have, far different, right? And so, when somebody says, "Oh, how'd you get your internship?" "Oh, my dad's friend." Our dad's friends look very different than the dad's friends group of our other friends,
Right.
right? That we may have gone to college with. And so that's sort of the premise. And that's not to, and I don't say any of this to say like, oh, we have it bad. We just have it different, right? We also have other superpowers that are our strengths, right? Whether it be cultural understanding, language powers, and all these things, right? And so for us, I think we just have to get better at talking about our achievements objectively, as I mentioned before. We also have to get better at hyping each other up and stop thinking that there's only one spot for one Asian at one organization and one job. I think at times we have to put down sort of the walls and the barriers that we've created ourselves to really hype each other up. I do think that a lot of it is based on scarcity mindset. I do think that a lot of it is based on the complex histories of us back home in Asia and the intercontinental conflicts that we've had. Um, I also think that as we grow, I think it's instilling each other and to encourage each other that we owe it not only to ourselves, but to our kids and other people who look up to us to leave a little bit of the lessons that we've learned behind, right? Just like you can't take money to the grave, you can't take your lessons to the grave either. And so here's a fun exercise, and I'm going to generalize. And so if you want to say I'm wrong, you can. But next time you go to a real life bookstore, right? A Barnes and Noble, maybe with a lot of inventory, go to the leadership section, go to the memoir section, right? And I want you to pay attention to how many how many accomplished Asian Americans, like objectively badass, accomplished Asian American business leaders, write books about themselves. The bar that we set for ourselves to be I am worthy of writing a book is really high
Hmm.
because it feels icky. We feels like we're bragging that we haven't done enough. Who's going to care about my story? All these things. And then, and I'm generalizing, and I'm going to put a lot of my own personal friends into this bucket. There's a lot of people in their 30s, in their 20s, who feel that other people should know their story. So they
Hmm.
go write a book,
Hmm.
right? And there is maybe not a causation, but there is certainly a correlation between both race, gender, and other metrics on based on who feels like the world needs to hear their story,
Yeah.
right? And it is this conviction. And so um, I won't say who because I think everybody knows who this person is, but uh, I happen to uh, one of the most successful Asian American business entrepreneurs in America, who is worth now billions of dollars and has really changed the way that we see Asian culture and food and all these things, has not written a book yet. And the number one reason this gentleman has not written a book about his own life and his business lessons is I don't think anybody would read it. Uh, he is finally now writing a book, from what I understand. Only
Have you been bugging him, Jerry?
my friend used to be in his team, and so yes, because I said I would read that book, and if I had that book 20 years ago when I was in college, my life would be different, right? Because it's about not only representation but proper representation, right? Because it still matters the experience and the context through which we live life and to experience these things. And so, good news, I think, is that based on the nudging of his kids and the grandkids, he is finally writing it. But these are things that can change the way we see things, right? Um, you know, the founders of YouTube are Asian American. We don't know their story, right? And it's not about writing that book, it's about the lessons that are embedded in them so that we can all learn, not just for the Asian people, but for everybody,
Yeah.
right?
But
But
it's,
we
you know, but
sometimes have this, yeah,
it's not true of everyone. There are some, I mean, one Committee 100 member is Jerry Yang, and everyone knows him. So it's not true for everyone. On the other hand, Committee 100 member is the founder of Zoom, but he's not a household name. So I think you're right. I
yeah,
will point out two things that are very much Asian American, which I hope the people in the audience will say, how do I try to blunt that problem? One is uh, we tend to be very loyal to our families, but we tend not to help each other, you know. And the very first webcast we had Buck G and Harrison Lung, and Harrison Lung was a partner at McKinsey at the time.
yep,
And he said, "Let me tell you the story." And he said, to illustrate, he said, two Jewish guys are at the bottom of a mountain and they want to get to the top of the mountain. And so they say, okay, let's work together and let's help each other up the mountain, right? Okay, you get this, I'll get the rope, so forth. He said the two Chinese guys or two Asian guys at the bottom of the mountain, and they look up, they both want to get mountain, and the one turns to the other and says, well, if you ever get up to the top of the mountain, I'll say hello to you. So the audience roared laughter, but it's not totally fake story. I mean, I think there's some
yeah,
so one of the lessons there is we got to do what a lot of groups do, which is try to help each other. We
sure,
do an unbelievable amount to help our families, right? Because we're very family centric, but
yeah,
we don't help each other, and I think that's very important. So that actually ties into mentorship because Asian Americans don't act as mentors to other Asian Americans. When they're successful, they tend not to. But that's also part of this issue of branding and reputation, right?
sure.
Because it's a tool issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a topic that I think we can talk about for a long time. You know, and I've experienced it, and I think it's this sort of subconscious almost desire or uh, need almost to be seen outside of our race, right? And so we feel extremely self-conscious when we are in the position of hiring somebody or promoting somebody,
Hmm.
and the best candidate happens to be Asian.
Hmm.
We tend to move away from that because we don't want the perception or the accusation that we are helping our people. Um, I have spoken to many Asian American executives off the record and saying, I don't, this is the reason why I don't executive sponsor my Asian ERG, because I don't want to be seen by my peers as the Asian executive.
Oh, that's interesting. That's
And I
interesting.
think that's incredibly sad because when you have the privilege and the voice, I think you should maximize it, right? And this is not a comparison conversation about how other groups are doing it any better or worse than we are. But you're right. We have to really understand the privileges that we have and the spaces that we get to occupy so that we can help each other along. And again, being Asian is incredibly complex. We are not unified by a country, language, food, culture, or anything. In fact, it is really complex because present day conflicts still are there, right? In terms of the complexities. And so, um, but yeah, it's super complex. But to go back to sort of, if you want to leave your mark in this world, help somebody.
Mhm.
If you've learned something, if you've navigated academia, corporate life, entrepreneurship, and you've learned a few things, and I will say that all 90 of us on this call have learned something, make it so that the next person doesn't have to, right? Like let them learn from your mistakes. Let them, step with you, right? Um, and so again, I still do think that we, as a unit, as a collective group of people, still tend to experience uh, broad scarcity mindset, that we don't have enough, that we haven't arrived yet. And so we keep wanting to collect for ourselves instead of thinking about how we can give. Again, I think these are much deeper issues than we can cover here on this call. But to my part, one of the so I walked away from post MBA corporate life to start a podcast called Dear Asian Americans, and that was 5.5 years ago. And I had to tell my wife, who at the time we had just become parents of two, that I was
And she
stepping
said,
away.
"Oh, perfect timing, Jerry."
Yeah, and so imagine, and COVID happened, and it all, in hindsight, everything worked out. But I thought about who taught me my business lessons, who taught me my life lessons, not the personal people, but the people that showed up to my school, the
Right.
people whose lectures, the podcasts that I was listening to, the books that I was reading, who was telling me how to live life and how to define success in life. And the short answer is that none of them looked like me, right? Very few of them not only looked like me, but didn't understand the cultural nuance of some of the things that we have to navigate,
Yeah.
right? The filial piety, the responsibilities that we have, the ways that we view family. We often joke that there's no word for nursing home in any Asian language because we don't do that, right? And so even just the ways that we see life. And so at the time, the conviction was very strong in me because I had just become a father of two. And I said, um, I'm about 20 years removed from college, and my kids are about 20 years from college. If they have the same challenges that I have, which is lack of accessibility to culturally resonant and relevant Asian American centric business and life lesson stories, then it's my fault because I can do something about it today. We don't have a distribution problem, we have the internet, and we certainly don't have a supply problem. Look at the members of C100, just look at our own personal networks. There are so many badass Asian people who've done stuff. And now it's just about getting them comfortable enough, encouraging them, creating platforms like this webinar that we're doing to come and share what they've learned, right? And so all that put together means that we just have to get louder, right? And I think we had a really cool moment during the pandemic when a lot of us got loud on platforms like LinkedIn. I remember seeing a lot of posts that said, I've been an executive at XYZ company for 10 plus years and I've never talked about my identity. But seeing what's happening to our people all over the country, I feel the strong need to talk about my story. And I thought it was
Jerry,
beautiful.
you made a good point. I really like the fact that you also talked about your kids.
Hmm.
The way I interpret it is that, earlier on we were talking about, parents, they say, oh, just study hard, whatever, and that therefore they're off. In
They're
other
not.
words, they're giving the wrong advice for the generation that say you or and I were in. And I think your point about your kids is the implication is don't repeat the mistake that your parents made. In other words, when your kids get to be growing up, whatever, think about and say, okay, what assumptions that I'm making, in fact, may be wrong because
Yeah.
another generation has gone by, right, Jerry, right? And because we're going to be guilty, if you don't think about it, you're going to be guilty of the same thing as your parents. It's just what we're guilty of is going to be different, right? Does that make sense?
Listen, crapping on our parents is a favorite pastime of every immigrant kid, right?
Yeah,
But I think we sometimes have to remind ourselves, one, the crap that they went through, I won't be able to go through. Are you kidding me?
yeah.
No cell phone, no Google, no group chat, and trying to figure out life in another country, right? Like it's impossible, and it's so impressive what they've done. And they're trying to do the best that they can to help us do the things that they couldn't, except they don't know as well as we do now how this game is played, right? They didn't have the luxury of understanding college, networking, corporate life. They just didn't. And
Yeah,
so,
but well, on the other hand, Jerry, to be fair, we had the one where we had four millennials as panelists who just said,
sure.
"What? How does it look?" And they were pretty blunt. They said, you know, uh, those of you who are over, and I hate to say the age because it's depressing. You don't understand what the tools are today, right?
Right.
That are different
Oh,
from
sure.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the
Well,
way,
I'm 41, and so like I am. They call me an elder millennial, whatever that means.
older
Um,
millennial.
but it's true, and I feel like my job as a dad is to teach my children the soft skills, right? Because the tools will change.
Yeah.
And so, again, to bring it back to personal branding, like the tools might change, right? Like LinkedIn's only been around since 2006. And so even though we consider it to be like the place where we develop our personal brand and grow our networks, that wasn't always the case. That didn't exist. And
And it
so,
might be something different 5 years from now.
yeah.
By the
And
way,
so,
we have now 12 questions. So what I'm going to do
cool.
is I'm going to ask you the last of the prepared questions that I
Yep.
had. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go scroll through. So there's some good questions here. We're going to scroll through. So my last question is, what books or other resource materials or videos would you recommend to this audience as they explore how to orchestrate their personal brand? Is there a
I
Julia Child cookbook for personal branding?
there isn't, and the I get to I have the honor of speaking on this topic, and I am just one opinion, right? And so the beauty about the personal brand is sort of meta in nature. You get to define for yourself what it is and how you use it. And the only way for you to learn how other people do it is to just absorb as much as you can,
Yeah,
right? I think there's value in, following other Asian American professionals who to learn from their story. But at the same time, I don't advocate for silencing anybody else's experiences and things like that because we have so much to learn, and there are far more things that we all share as human beings than divide us from a identity perspective.
yeah,
From an Asian American business perspective, if you are active on LinkedIn, I share as much as I can. Dave Liu is a fantastic voice. Um, there's a wonderful, an amazing, smart woman, Simi Shah, who's getting her MBA at Wharton right now. She built a platform called South Asian Trailblazers. She interviews notable South Asians in business and in life. Um, and I think it's just, go down the rabbit hole of podcasts. There are a lot, but I would always encourage you to ask yourself as you're consuming all this content, what is the context that is missing that would make this work for me?
yes, right.
Right. And so we all live, if you stack the whole 8 billion people on earth, everybody can get from 1 to 8 billion on a privilege scale. The higher you are up on a privilege scale, and Peter, you and I are educated East Asian men. And so we're very high relative to the other peers in our Asian American subset group, right? And so if you have more privilege, then understand that you can have access to more things and spaces. And think about how that relates to other people that might listen to your story, that might learn from you, right? And so it's also good to be mindful of the privileges that you have that other people don't, right? And so I used to read a lot of books on public speaking. Obviously, I speak for a living now, but you know, one of the most offensive pieces of advice that a lot of generally middle-aged white men like to give when it comes to personal branding or public speaking is just speak up. If you want to be heard, just speak up. And that's not bad advice in and of itself, right? But what if I told all of our sisters in the room? What if I told people for whom English is not a first language? What if I told the people for whom their entire cultural identity is not messing with harmony and speaking up is disruption equals messing with harmony to just speak up? We have to do a lot of mental gymnastics and unlearning to get to that point of understanding that it is okay for us to speak up and that there's value in speaking up. And there's been a lot of chatter in the American political discourse about H-1B visas. If your livelihood is tied to that visa, you are less willing and even more willing to eat shit at work so that you don't put your family's livelihood and your presence in this country at risk. It's important to understand the nuance of all of that, right?
But
And there,
also true, it's what you say too. And I
sure.
remember, I went to business, I got an MBA, and I tried to do the smart thing is I talked to 3 or 4 people who had gone through and recently graduated, and I asked them, you know, what's the key to success? And I got 2 answers. One is learn accounting before you go because it's really difficult to learn accounting. So that was one, but that doesn't relate to this. The other one was it's not how much you say, it's what you say. So if you go to each class and you have say one intelligent thing, that's going to be more effective than if you talk, 5 times and so forth. So it's not only, but the worst thing is not to say anything because that's neither good or bad, but it's got to have the right mix of how often, you speak and what you say, right?
Yep.
Now we're going to turn now to these questions. First one is from B Yang, who said, is there a way to accelerate personal branding using ChatGPT? And can you give me an example?
We covered that a little bit. Use it to help. Don't use it to be you. Don't let it replace you. Um, you can you can use a lot with it, and it gets better every day. And so you can feed it a whole bunch of stuff. It doesn't read websites, but you can give it writing samples and saying, hey, can you write this in my tone? A fun thing that I did and I posted about on LinkedIn a few months ago is I fed it like 5 or 6 of my posts and I said, hey, can you give me an analysis of how I come across? And that was really thoughtful. And so use it for exercises like that require a lot of objective computing power. Um, but don't go to ChatGPT and saying, "Hey, I attended this guy's webinar on personal branding. I want to become a thought leader in this space. Can you write me my next 5 LinkedIn posts?" And copy and paste that. Don't do that. But there are ways to help it, accent and sort of add to the value of that you're bringing to the world already.
Yeah, and you do lose authenticity, I
Oh
think,
yeah,
through
it's
that.
not worth it.
By the way, when ChatGPT first came out, I said, "Oh, what the hell?" My wife was traveling; she's a professor, so I asked ChatGPT to write a poem. I said, "Here, I want a poem about this." I emailed it to her, and like 3 seconds later, she emailed back, "ChatGPT?" question mark.
Yeah.
So when she came back, I said, "How did you figure it out?" She said, "It wasn't very authentic." So, if you want to write a poem, write it yourself. Don't use ChatGPT.
Yep.
Or at least if you want me to appreciate it, don't let use ChatGPT. So next question is kind of a little challenging. It's kind of nuanced, but I'll read it anyway. If a full professor plans to change career trajectory, what are the best practices for personal branding? You got to unbundle it because it's like actually more than one question.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's letting the world know what you're really good at, right? If you're a professor, you've done some research, right? You've got peers, you have tangible business value to the world to add, insights to add. Start talking about that. Don't expect people to know you. Even on LinkedIn, we are at the mercy of the algorithm. We're at the mercy of a lot of other things. People are busy. I have a theory that you could post the same thing on LinkedIn every day for 10 straight days, the same exact thing at the same exact time, and different people will see it. And people won't get annoyed by it because they're busy with their own lives. So even if somebody sees the same post on the 4th day, they'll just assume that it's the repetition of the same thing they saw 3 days ago. Get more comfortable posting about it. Do we remember each of us everything that we saw the last time we opened up Instagram? No. And so, and I mean this in the most loving way. People don't care about you, me, us as much as we think they do. And so, just get it out. But yeah, the professor angle is interesting, but which just tells me that you're really smart. You've done a lot of things. You have a lot of experience. You have a lot of student teaching skills. You have presentation. You have a lot of transferable skills that you're probably not giving yourself credit for.
Yeah. Now the next one is very interesting. We said a lot of positive things about LinkedIn, but the next one is someone who had an issue about LinkedIn and said, "Is there an alternative?" The person said, "I used LinkedIn for quite some time until a former colleague sabotaged me on that platform by saying my experiences are, quote, lies, unquote. Anything else other than LinkedIn? I've yet to find a new professional contact from that platform." So,
Look, I don't have a good answer for this. I rarely, if at all, ever hear about stories. So, um, and unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to into this, but yeah, I generally people are honest. Generally, people are truthful about their experiences because everything is fact checkable. There's a lot of scam and spam behavior on the platform, but that gets called out pretty quickly. Um, as far as a competitor to LinkedIn, teams in the country and the world trying to build the next LinkedIn competitor. I think for the foreseeable future, especially when after they were acquired by Microsoft, I think it's here to stay. And so I know that's probably not as helpful to the person that asked it, um, but um, and I'm sorry that you went through that, but um, I don't think it's something that is insurmountable from a coming back from perspective.
now, Jerry, I'm not supposed to read chat comments that are praise, but here's one that's praising you, but it makes a point. Here's a fellow, Aaron Yoshimura. So, Aaron, I have outed you as the one writing this. At C100 and Peter, thank you for hosting a session on personal branding. I've been training personal branding for 20 plus years in AAPI leadership programs and sometimes wonder if it's still relevant. Jerry, your presentation is spot on, and I appreciate your current and cutting edge thought leadership on why personal branding is even more important for AAPIs to build in on. So you just got a cheerleading, Jerry. So you starting to lose.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. So thank you, Aaron. Uh, so um, let's see.
Oh,
The
Peter,
next,
I think we lost you for a second, but you're back.
okay, there are a couple that are just comments, right? Uh,
Yeah.
what's the next one that's good?
There's some questions on speaking. Um, when you give an hour-long presentation virtually or on Zoom, do you tend to use a script? No, I never use a script. It sounds robotic. Peter and I had a meeting to talk about what we were going to talk about, but I don't have a script. Again, but that's my style. If you give me 4 bullet points, I can talk for an hour. Other people prefer to write everything out and use a teleprompter. So do what comfortable for you. But regardless of how you do it, rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Um, and the first time you present should not be the first time you present. Um, but I think we all have plenty of practice from Zoom days. Um, let's see. B Yang thinks there should be a book writing project at C100. I agree.
Mhm.
Um, there's actually a Asian American book publisher now. Um, that is Asian American owned. It's called Third State, run by Stephanie Lim and Charles Kim, and so they're publishing Asian American books, or books written by Asian American people exclusively. Um, I want to address this one. So this person says, I don't think I've learned anything in life to share, LOL, although I have a ton of licenses, degrees, and I've been a vice president. What are you talking about? All those things means that you've learned stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
they sound good to me,
I
right?
know. So we have to change our mindset, right?
Yeah.
Everything we've learned, and we've been taught to sort of race to the next level of life, right? Get promoted, get to the next thing, get to the next thing, and I think everybody needs to pause, take a step back, and really just appreciate all that you've accomplished and celebrate yourselves.
Yeah, and actually one other point related to that is you got to enjoy the trip along the way. Because the reality is, it's not getting to the very top necessarily. That's the thing. It's whether you are enjoying the trip along the way.
Yep.
And Jerry, clearly you've enjoyed the trip along the way. You've shifted what you focused on, but the fact that you're doing what you're doing now doesn't mean that what you did when you finished your business school thing was worthless, right? So you got to enjoy the
No.
trip along the way, right?
Hey, listen, I think about that every time my student loan checks go, but I still have to believe that it was worth it. And we're at the top of the hour. I want to be
Yeah,
mindful of everybody's time, and
yeah,
unfortunately,
we do like to end on time. Maybe, Jerry, if there's one more question you want to answer, or if you have an ending comment, kind of a takeaway comment that you want to give to the audience? People have written some very, very nice comments here. So, and by the way,
William,
Jerry will have all of these. In some of these cases, people just said, I'd like to be connected and so forth. So
yeah.
make sure that
So
Jerry
here,
has it, right?
I'm going to put a link in the chat. So I'm going to give you something and then you give me something in return. I have a resource guide to write really cool bios that you can use on LinkedIn, on your websites, and just general bio guiding tips. And then the second part of that document is the 7 things that you should have perfected on your LinkedIn profile. And so, and then this way you get onto my email list and we can, carry the conversation on there. So if you sign up for it, this is a special C100 link. You get a download link. William, Mr. Michigan, I will reach out to you. Love what you said, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I just want to say, Jerry, ending comment to the audience before we end. Go for it, right?
Yeah, look, life's too short. And I'll end on this. A lot of our, we look a lot as immigrants and as Asian Americans about what our grandparents did or what our ancestors did for us to be here, which is great, right? We want to make them proud. I encourage everybody to think about the flip side of that. What do you want your grandkids to say that you did? Not just making money, not just going to the fancy schools, but what are you doing to leave a legacy for them, to leave your story and the lessons, right? And the people that they've helped. And all of this is very, 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 very simple. If you trick your mind into thinking that everything that you do to build a personal brand is in the pursuit of helping somebody else, then it becomes so much easier.
Yeah.
The jitters go away, the discomfort about bragging goes away. I know there's been some questions around confidence building and not feeling like you're bragging. You're there to help, right? I've talked about my story for the last hour. And if that's been helpful to you, then I am grateful that I got to do it. And I don't feel any weird about me talking about myself.
Yeah.
And so you have to do it next time you get a chance.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to add just to Jerry's comment about what you want to be remembered for. My wife and I, for the first time, went to the annual Berkshire Hathaway, the Warren Buffett annual meeting. Where he sits in front of thousands of people in a stadium, and for 4.5 hours he takes questions from everyone, right? And it's famous, and we figure we better do it because, who knows how long he's going to be around. But he was asked, and they don't pre-wire the questions, but so they just select people. And someone said, you know, uh, you know, how do you figure out what you should try to do in life, right? And Warren Buffett said, well, I'm going to quote my friend Charlie Munger, who just passed away at 100, who was my friend and colleague for long. He was asked the same question a couple of years ago, and he said, what you want to do is say, imagine what you would like people to say at your funeral about you and work backwards, which I thought was a very, very clever quote. In other words, think about what you really want to have been known for, your brand and your name, when you leave this earth, and work backwards and say, how do I end up there in the end over my life? Well, with that, thank you, Jerry.
Well, Peter, I got one favor. The
Sure.
chat wasn't open even for me to, and so people are asking how they can get to the email link.
Yeah. So
Right now, the link only goes to you, and so people are asking in the Q&A.
okay, why don't you just tell people? Tell them what.
Okay, it's jerrywan.kit.com is the name of the email server, and so it's jerrywan.kit.com/C100.
Okay.
Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I am the easiest Jerry1 to find, although there are many of us. And then I'll share the link there. It's jerrywan.kit.com/C100.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you again, Jerry, for your, for sharing your thoughts and answering these questions. And to the audience, I want to thank you for joining us, and hope to see you at our next events. We've got one coming up on how to network, and we have one on, career ceilings in real estate. So you'll all get invitations. We hope you'll join the ones that you find most interesting for your own benefit. So thank you all, and see you next time.